there is no work-life balance. There is work and life, and they're all mixed together. That's how the working world, at least in the white-collar job market, has become, where you do not have the leverage to just switch off.
I want to leave what I'm comfortable in and go out there and look for jobs. And I don't even know how they're going to kind of work out, right? If anything out of this process, I'm going to only grow and learn. And I think you have to find that balance between being humble and patient and knowing that yes, your value will be recognized, but at the same time it is equally important to stand up for yourself. You have to kind of be your biggest proponent in terms of putting your case out there and making sure that you're valued. As you readjust your life, change the parameters you want to measure and see the growth in that. Don't focus on what's not growing, but focus on what's growing. We get so lost in focusing on the outer dimension that we forget that it is the inner dimension that drives the outer dimension. And when I talk about the inner dimension, it is your confidence.
Welcome to another episode of the Working Women podcast. And today I have for you Alak, who is the founder of Element Truffles, who is a chocolate company in New Jersey, based out of New Jersey. So, Alak, without wasting any more time, I would love for you to introduce yourselves and tell the audience what is it that you really do and your journey.
Sure. So thank you for having me here. It's such an honor. My name is Alak, and I am the co-founder of Elements. We make Ayurveda-powered, clean and functional chocolates. And while I can say this line with so much ease today, it has been quite a journey to kind of get to this point. Like I like to say about it is like in my former life, I was a Wall Street trader, you know, trading equities, futures, currencies, a lot of financial stuff, right? And I think I definitely studied for that and enjoyed my time doing what I was doing. But what I realized is that the element of the whole job that I really enjoyed was the problem solving aspect of it, right? But there was never an aspiration to say, okay, I want to learn deeper about how this works or what happens. That passion for me was somewhere in food. And the joy that it gave me to create recipes, to work with real ingredients was just not comparable to anything, right? And so many times I would love hosting people, I would love cooking meals, and everybody was like, you should start your own restaurant. And then the other side of the spectrum would be like, but cooking for your loved ones is very different than cooking commercially, right? So there was always these two sides, people on the two sides of the table telling me two different things. But something inside me was telling me that I had to explore this opportunity. And I tried to push away this voice, thinking, okay, it was midlife crisis. I was just bored of doing what I was doing and I needed a change. And soon, when I do it for a few more years, I'll be like, okay, why did I even jump into it, right? So there was again two sides on the table, even on my internal voice going on.
Yeah.
But I think in the end, one thing that really stuck with me was that if I don't give this a try now, I'll probably live the rest of my life with the regret that I did not explore this possibility. And that one thought allowed me to take this plunge and leap of faith into starting this company.
That's very interesting, Alak. You talk about how you were a finance personnel in your previous life, right? So that's very interesting. I would like to a little bit talk more about that. The reason is that most of us, including me, I come from a middle class family, right? So the primary motivation that we have is that really supporting ourselves, bringing bread to the table, right? A food to the table. Putting food on the table is important. Paying the bills is important. So let's go back to the younger Alak in terms of when she decided that she wants to join finance. So, what was that thought process, right? Like, why did you decide to pursue a certain degree? Why did you decide to pursue that certain career when you were younger?
That's such a good question, because yeah, when I first decided to come to this country, I feel as an immigrant, right? there are certain expectations that we set on ourselves, especially when we are leaving home and coming to this country, right? I think the first and foremost thing was, okay, I'm spending so much money on myself, I have to make the best of it. And what does that mean, making the best of it? It is earning every money that was spent on me and earning way more so I can live a comfortable life. In your mind, there's an expectation of a life that you want to create for yourself. And so there's already mental calculations happening in terms of, what do I need to study? When do I need to get my first job? And what is going to be my path in terms of, moving up the ladder so I can meet or I can get to that place that I want to get to. Also, this whole, I think, subtle pressure that we put on ourselves to make our parents proud, to, whoever's, and again, when we say parents, it's also, I think, a whole set of society that you have to kind of make them proud, right? That, oh my God, they have to know that I work at, a good place, I'm doing well, I'm succeeding. Again, the parameters of success were mostly around the position you held, the company you were at, and all those things, right? And so yeah, that's how the journey started. Was, most of my colleagues were kind of coming to the US, and they were pursuing different areas, and of course computer science was very hot at the moment. And so I came here, I did my master's in computer science, and then the next thing was, okay, find the best possible job out there. Again, at the time I graduated was the tech boom, right? So there were plenty of opportunities available. It was a very different time. People would fly you in for interviews, and that felt really amazing, right? To kind of at such a young age being able to experience that. And again, when I decided which job to go with, I went with, I went with Cisco Systems, which was a company that was well established, and I had a very well defined role in the e-commerce space. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how the journey of, and so again, that's interesting because I started my journey in technology. And then I worked in tech for some time. And then me and my husband, we were in a long distance relationship. So he was on the East Coast, I was on the West Coast. And for the longest time, we were on two sides of the coast. Then I moved through Cisco to the same coast, but still I was in North Carolina, he was in New York. So we were managing that side of our life as well. And then finally I decided to move to New York. And when I moved to New York, I was working from home, but I realized that, that was actually, I didn't realize, but I feed off of energy of other people, right? So I love interactions. And I think my husband was very quick to pick up on that. And he was like, okay, why don't you start exploring jobs in New York? And that's when I landed my job with Goldman. When I landed a job, it was on the tech side of things. And this was the first time I was introduced to the world of finance, right? And I was blown away by it. Like it was so high paced. It was like there was just so much momentum, so much happening. And I think, like I said before, I think that person inside of me who likes to tackle challenges, who likes to solve problems, got super excited about it. And within a very short time, I moved over to the business side of things, and I was managing and working as a trader on the desk. So yeah, that's kind of been the journey in terms of starting as a young Alak to moving into the finance side at Goldman.
So thank you, Alak, for sharing that. It's very interesting and very interesting for a lot of Indian women who are really listening to this podcast and who are trying to follow a similar journey. Because, even in India, even now, there is primary emphasis on getting a comp science degree or getting a technology degree. But then most of the people realize that maybe technology is a good tool to start with, but maybe that's not the domain that they're interested in. So talk to me about how did you make your move from technology to finance at Goldman? So what are the top three things that you did that helped you really transition from technology to business? Somebody in the business side saying that Alak is going to be great. Let's get her and let's get her to the ground. How did you do that?
It's so amazing how you kind of getting to all those points in my life that were so pivotal, right? And I think this was a very interesting time in my life as well, right? Because yes, so I was working in technology, and then someone on business side, saw the potential. I expressed my interest, and then I kept on mentioning that this is where I want to be, right? And I was being told, yes, we'll make it happen, we'll make it happen. And I remember initially I felt like, okay, I'll just keep waiting. They've heard me and this is going to happen. But nothing was happening. And to the point where I was like, are they just telling me, they'll do it, but it's never going to happen, right? And so after a point when my patience ran out, I pretty much said, at this point of time, I really want to pursue what I want to pursue, which is I want to now move to finance. It was very clear in my head. So I started looking for opportunities outside. And I went, I interviewed at a few places. And again, this is the point where I felt like I was a little fearful, right? Because you're in a comfortable place, and you don't know what you're getting into next, right? You're excited about it, but you don't know what it really entails. And here I am, I want to leave what I'm comfortable in and go out there and look for jobs. And I don't even know how they're going to kind of work out, right? And it's always also that challenge, right? When you put yourself out there on the job market, is when the reality hits the ground. There's a certain perception about who you are, but then will I get job offers? What will happen? But so I went through that whole cycle of thoughts, and then I was like, you know what? I have nothing to lose. I have a job on hand, and I can go outside and interview. And I will, if anything, out of this process, I'm going to only grow and learn where I actually stand, right? So, with that faith and strength, I just went outside, interviewed, got a couple of jobs, and I came back, to my manager's manager, and I told them that, I have this offer, this is what they're offering me, and I need to get back to them within the next 2 days. And within 24 hours, I was transitioned over to the business side in the same company. And I think this is what I felt was the biggest learning for me, is that when you stand up for yourself, things start moving for you. And I think you have to find that balance between being humble and patient and knowing that yes, your value will be recognized, but at the same time, it is equally important to stand up for yourself, to be the, you have to kind of be your biggest proponent in terms of putting your case out there and making sure that you're valued.
Yeah, I agree with so many of those things, Alak, right? That if you just continue to trust that this person is going to make it happen for me and this person is going to make it happen for me, those two people already have something in their mind going on that they have to make it happen for themselves. So you are not their priority. You are only your own priority. And when you start to bring in that energy, as you said, right? Like, uh, if I want, I can get a couple of job offers outside on the street. So this is how I can land it. So either you I get it here or either I get it outside, but this is what I'm going to get. So I think that's such a valuable lesson, and thank you so much for sharing that. Now, also want to touch upon a very interesting thing that happens during the transition, right? I'm certain that you requested for this transition maybe after 2 years of being at Goldman, at least in the role, so that you had a good track record of how you were performing and business side was looking at things, and then Alak is really performing and really providing value. So that is going to be the key. But talk to me about how did your managers react when you moved teams? So that is also something which is a tricky conversation, an interesting conversation, primarily because your manager drives your total compensation at the end of the year. So that might come out of the other business segment, but you have not spent too much time there. So talk to me about those conversations, and if you had any challenges making this transition from a team perspective.
I think that is such an important aspect, right? Because here, when I even moved to the business side, I was going to continue to work with the technology counterpart of it, right? And so, and I think even if you are not, what I have learned over the years is that, it is always nice to move from one area to the other in a very amicable way, right? When you try to burn bridges or when you end up burning bridges, that's not gonna benefit you as a person who wants to grow, right? And I feel there are always ways to navigate that, right? So you have to kind of look out for yourself, but at the same time, you don't need to put the other person down. And I think this is where it was a little challenging, right? Because I was an important person on their team and they wanted me there. But at the same time, I think very openly communicating that how you really, like you said, right? I really valued the time I had there in technology because that is what opened up my perspective. That's what helped me establish as a person who was even ready for the next role, right? So I don't want to miss out on that opportunity that was provided. But oftentimes what happens is when we communicate with management, we are only stuck in that moment of time. And we feel like, everybody's against us. But I feel when you put your case out there and you tell them that, I'm very grateful for what you've offered me. And now at this point in my life, I really feel I want to explore this side of it. I think people also can relate to it because they themselves struggle with that, right? So I think for me, that was a important learning and also kind of the way I approached things and saw how it worked out. Because even then, when I was in the business side, I actually had strong allies on the other side that were rooting for me, that were helping me. And I think that kind of just makes you even, it empowers you even more to do a better job at where you're at.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Alak, to really have that ability to persuade without authority. And that you
Yes.
can do only if people like you, if you're likable, right? If people don't like you, they will not do anything for you. But if people like you, they might put in a certain more effort to get things done for you, even though not a lot, but at least something that we can expect out of those relationships. So I think that is such an interesting perspective and such an important story that you've shared with everybody. And I think the main takeaway is that really network is is the key to making this sort of transition. But at the same time, having the right skills on your resume is very, very important for you to hold your ground and have that conversation. And really bridging the skill gap is key.
Exactly. And I think being authentic and at the
Yeah.
same time recognizing that you're not being attacked.
Right.
The minute you get defensive, it almost
Yeah.
becomes hard to communicate. But when you open up,
Hmm.
you become a little vulnerable. You share your perspective,
Hmm.
you bring people on your side.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's so interesting, Alex. So while you were making this transition, right, from West Coast to East Coast, versus the location change, and then the company change, and then your domain change. So what you were doing versus what you were doing then, did you have a set of mentors or a set of um, guides who were supporting you through your journey, and what kind of questions would you bring to them? And the reason I ask this, Alak, is that now we are sitting here, we have had this everything behind us. So in hindsight is always 2020, right? We always know why things worked out a certain way, but in the moment is very hard to really identify. So for example, some things that you talked about, being defensive, and a lot of colleagues can think that you're being defensive or you're being a little bit closed off. So, how did you manage that in the time?
Yeah, I think mentors play such an important role, and right, and I think mentors don't necessarily need to come into your life as a with the title of a mentor, but I can remember, a handful of people who have been so pivotal, right, in terms of guiding me at critical points, not only in my career, but also in my personal life, because you're young, you're an immigrant. You don't have your parents, a phone call away, at least in the same time zone, right? You're always kind of that you're stuck sometimes in moments of times when you have to make those difficult decisions. And I feel um, having those set of people in your life who you look up to, whose judgment you can trust, is so important. So feel partly for me, of course, consider myself fortunate that I have met some great people. But again, I think connecting connecting with people without an agenda is what helps you build these strong relationships. And that's what I have realized. And especially like you said, right, when I was in California, I'd graduated from there. I had a lot of friends there, right? But when I moved to North Carolina, um, I barely knew anyone. And at that time, remember there was one person I would in North Carolina who would be on calls on certain meetings with that I used to be with, and I just reached out to him and said, I'm moving to North Carolina, and he immediately kind of stepped in and started helping me out, right? So I feel sometimes even to ask for help, right? That was again a big thing for me, is like, how do I ask someone who I don't know for help, right? But what I realized is that when I shared what was going on in my life, people were willing to help. And so he helped me secure, like, tell me what area I had to move in, what were the good things, like, what was a good apartment. So when I landed in North Carolina, I actually had an apartment where I just had to go sign the lease for it. Now that's such a huge kind of sense of relief when you're moving to a completely new place. Um, I remember I had a manager, and she's someone who just guided me in so many ways on my journey, especially because I wanted to kind of accomplish a certain thing. So I would share with her my goals, and I started to rely on her guidance a lot. And I remember when 9/11 happened. My husband was here in New York, so he's a 9/11 survivor. And I was in North Carolina at the moment, and I remember, like, she was the first person I kind of called and told her, like, I think I need to go drive to New York. What should I do? And I feel having these people in your life that you can reach out to during those moments is what kind of helps you move through life and your career path.
Uh, yeah, that's so important, having the right set of network and people that you can rely on in terms of really sharing what you're going through, and then who can provide you certain sort of emotional support, or at least logistical support, or provide you their thoughts in terms of how you are thinking, so that you can structure your own thinking as well. For me as well, I have developed a few mentors along my journey in my career space. And I really think about mentors and sponsors, Alak, just for the audience, right, is that mentors are your guides who are going to almost tell you the directions that you're going, what are the pros and cons, right? But not really push you in one way or the other, but just give you a crux of what is going to happen if you take either of or those roads. But sponsors are also very important in the sense that these are people who are raising their hands and saying that Alak is a good candidate for moving, right? Shiv is a good candidate for moving, and I can bet my money or my responsibilities on Alak, right? So that's also very key. So two sets of people, very very important in our career journey, um, right? In corporate. So that is something very important that you bring out. Now, thank you for sharing that. It was a very interesting conversation on your entire transition from technology to finance, moving West Coast to East Coast. Now, I want to focus a little bit about on your relationship as well, right? I think that's also a very important part of our entire life. Um, that we spend so much time with our spouse, our partner, our family members. So, talk to me about your long distance relationship. I think that's a very interesting conversation. People love to hear, because there are so many times that you would see that people are at different places individually, because at that point in their lives, that is what is required of them. So talk to me about your long distance relationship. How did you manage?
Yeah, looking back, even I wonder how did we manage, right? Because it's very, very challenging, and especially when you're on two sides of the coast. Because when I would wake up, he would already be at work, and by the time I got back from work, he was almost ready to wrap up his day, right? So it was so hard. And again, this is the time when you're setting up your career, right? You were kind of at a very junior role in your company, and all your energy is really focused on putting your best at work. And making sure that you're recognized for it, right? So I feel during the day, there's no way you kind of find that time. And again, this was the time when cell phones were just kind of in, so it wasn't as convenient as it is now. I felt like one of the most important things that I learned was that communication was so key, right? Because when we were not able to communicate little things that were happening, by the end of the week, when the weekend came up, it had already bubbled up to a point where you were kind of not having the same challenge, had no, which you could have just talked through, now had a charge to it, right? An emotional charge to it, and that elevated things very quickly, right? So I think very quickly we realized that it was very important for us to be communicating and being able to find that time and space from each other when we had each other's undivided attention. So we, of course, we went through the struggle, then we tried to carve out these times, and most of the times it worked, but there were times when it did not work. And I think that is when we also decided that even if we were not living together, it was important that we were on the same side of the coast, right? But again, all this was solved through only one medium, which was communicating, right? The minute you start shutting off, or you start kind of assuming things about each other, you realize that that gap between you starts getting bigger and bigger. And what happens is, you're often, I think, at that time in your life, you're also looking for that emotional support, that person that you can go to and be vulnerable with, right? And when that person's not available, you try to kind of find different avenues of letting it out, right? So again, I think openly communicating about what the challenges are becomes more and more critical, and maybe even having a set of good friends. I think for me, what really worked was, and even for him, we were living in a house with friends that, we grew up in India with. So going to them kind of just, as you know, that you could just kind of went out, or share certain things and get it out of your system. So having that also supported kind of this long distance relationship.
That's very interesting, Alak. And how long were you in a long distance relationship?
We were in a long distance relationship for 3 years.
Wow, that's a substantial amount of time. And you
Yes.
made it a point to visit East Coast, West Coast.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. So what also helps is, I still remember those moments when my husband surprised me.
Yeah,
And again, it's those little moments where he traveled like for 10 hours, taking two
yeah,
connections, just coming to see me
yeah.
for 24 hours, right? And I think doing those kind of things definitely kind of hit as a reset button,
Hmm.
where you charged up,
Yeah,
for another period of time. Yeah, but again, flying coast to coast when you just new at your job,
yeah,
you're trying to save money, you don't have that many days off.
yeah,
It did become challenge, but you get creative, you get adventurous.
hmm,
I think that's what keeps the spark alive.
yeah. And how long have you been married now, Alak?
Oh my God. It's been 22 years now.
Wow, that's very interesting, Alak. So how and now looking back, 20 plus years, 15 plus years, how do you keep your spark alive now? Like, what are the kind of conversations that you have?
So I feel, starting this company with my husband has definitely brought in a brand new perspective, in our relationship. Because, there's this time, of course, when you're dating, you get to know each other, and then you kind of start your career paths together, and there's an excitement there. Now we don't have kids, so for us that transition has not happened. Where again, I think with kids, I think the relationship between the couples evolve. I think for us it has been Elements is our baby, right? Like, where we started doing this. And what I realize is, when you run a company together, it's like another marriage, right? Because you're two people, two very different people working towards the same goal. And I would tell Kushal so many times, wow, like there are different things about you that I haven't known for 15 years, that I'm getting to see, right? And I think that is what kind of just that opportunity or the possibility of getting to learn from each other, um, knowing how much we've grown together, right? That is what keeps the relationship alive. And I feel about 10 or 15 years ago, yeah, 15 years ago, we started our meditation journey together. And I feel that has really been the kind of, the center point of the anchor uh, of our relationship. Because starting on this journey, the spiritual journey together, I think we've both evolved as human beings, kind of on similar timelines. I think we have our own path, right? But again, it's almost like, what makes a marriage or a companionship successful is where you have a common goal, but each one of you allows each other to get there in their own beautiful way. And I feel like when you do that, you feel the freedom of being able to explore your life, right? And at the same time, you can see how the other person's doing it, and you're like, wow, like this is another way that can be approached, right? I feel oftentimes what happens is we try to push each other to be like each other, almost like, you do a certain things a certain way and you push the other person. And I felt having that openness, but also coming together time to time and resetting that goals and aligning yourself on that, kind of keeps the journey exciting, beautiful. Yeah, and there's still so much charm and love.
I resonate with that so much, Alak, right? That even in our marriage, I'm an I'm an introvert. My husband is an extrovert. We are very completely different people at our core. Like how he gets energized is when he's coming out of a party where there were 20 people, and I feel drained coming out of a party with 20 people, right? So I want my time and just sit and just maybe doom scroll or read a book or something, right?
Yes.
And he's like, oh no, now let's meet more people. So uh, I tell him, for one weekend I think this is enough. Then next weekend we will do it again. And also I'm a consultant by my profession, so
Oh,
I
wow.
work with a lot of people on a daily basis, a lot of new people on a daily basis, um, which means that by the end of the week I need time to recharge.
Yes,
And he's like,
absolutely.
let's meet a few more people on Saturday and Sunday. So it's very, very interesting how different people. It's very important to understand what will help other people or not in your companionship. And then now he also realizes that after say 3 or 4 hours at the party, I will want to leave. So he makes an effort to get to that. Like previously, he would not have made an effort to get to that. So that's very interesting to learn and set common goals and have interesting things that you can talk about together, but also your separate interests that you can continue to pursue, so that both of you do not lose your own identities as a part of the marriage,
Exactly.
but then the marriage also has its own identity and its own charm. And having that friendship is also key, where
Oh, so important.
right.
Yes,
So
yes,
I
yeah.
think it starts with love, but we are more friends now than that puppy-eyed love that you would have in
Oh,
your teenagers, right?
100%,
So
100%.
that's
Yes.
very, very important and very, very key. And the kind of calmness that you feel with the right companion, that you can just be, and you can just be, right? There's
Yeah, it's
nothing
a
to be.
judgment-free zone, right?
Yeah,
Like, no matter, you can be your true, authentic self,
yeah,
and you know that you'd still be, you'll not be judged,
yeah,
and you would have that relationship like that. Just safety. It's a safe zone
yeah,
almost, right?
yeah.
Where you can just be.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for sharing, Alak. I think that was very helpful in terms of sharing your relationship and how do you continue to make it successful after 20 plus years of marriage, right? So that's very, very key because even in the past, what we have seen in our past generations of our parents is a lot of codependency, a lot of identity shift in terms of getting their marriages, where most of the women have their identities tied to to their marriage, to their families, to their kids, right? So that's very, very important shift that is starting to happen recently, where we are starting to think that, yes, what I want is also equally important, right? And then what we create together is also equally important. So coming from that mindset is very, very important. So Alak, thank you for sharing all your journey from your career transition, technology, finance. We talked about your relationship. We talked about your long distance relationship and what keeps your companionship going. So now talk to me about, why did you quit all of it, right? Quit the entire life that you have created and said, I want to build something from scratch. So now talk to me about that. How did that shift happen?
So I think it was all to do with my inner voice getting so loud that I could not ignore it. Right. So, like I was sharing before, the thought kept popping up that I was meant to do something. I have been given some gifts. I'm passionate about making an impact. There's a different energy when I talk about food, and I had to bring that to life, right? But the fear inside of you, right, of leaving what you've worked so hard for, what you've built so much, to leave it all and jump into this was also equally real. But I felt like it was more that I had to give this a try, because if I didn't, I would probably regret that decision, right? So I think that is what helped me kind of quit what I was doing. And I feel also the support that I found, especially in my husband, right? So in those moments of doubt, when I would question things, the one thing that he would keep saying is, what do you have to lose, right? Think about that. And I felt like when I looked at the whole problem in that standpoint, I felt if I did not give this a chance, I was actually going to lose myself. And that was way more precious than anything that I had ever built, right? And I think when I asked that question to myself, it did become very clear. And so when we both were on the same page, that's when I went to my parents and kind of shared with them that this is something I was considering. And my parents have been very supportive from the beginning, really provided us, me and my sister, with everything that we ever needed in terms of education, growth, right? And providing that support system for us to flourish. Never kind of making us think like, we were girls and we had to behave a certain way, or we could not have certain aspirations. So, in that sense, I feel very, very fortunate, right? But when my parents first heard about it, they were like, but why? You built so much, you've accomplished so much. Why now do you want to do that? And I think in their mind also, it was more like, is this just more, a fleeting thought that I'm acting upon? And so they had to do their share of at least asking the right questions. And I think just sharing with them my thought process and where I was coming from, and for them to know that both Kushal and I were on the same page in terms of moving forward with that direction, I think they kind of also were fully supportive of it. They were like, okay, if you really feel strongly about it, definitely go for it. And the minute I made the decision, I think they've been so excited. Like they've helped us wrap chocolate bars. Anytime. I'm sure this podcast is something that they're probably gonna, forward it to their friends on WhatsApp groups. So that pride that their daughter is doing something still stays. And I think that way I feel very fortunate. I think having that support system, that who you fall upon being on your side, because see, when you take such an leap of faith, what happens is the biggest fear is, what if I fail? What if I made the wrong decision? What will happen now? The reality is nothing. We make wrong decisions all the time, and we figure a way out to come out of it. But when you're making that decision, when you have that small team, right, that you can rely on, who's on your side, who's like, okay, no matter what, you're not alone in this. I think that's the other thing is, right? If I fail and I'm alone, how will I come out of it? So I feel these two things, so just having that support system helped me. And then inside having the conviction of why I was doing this, right? I think so whenever you're making this transition, sitting on this thought of your why is so important. Because when that is clear, when you question yourself, okay, why did I quit that? You can always go back to the other why. This is exactly why I did it. And so I'm now not going to quit what I'm doing just because there are some challenges on the way.
I think that's so helpful, Alak, right? That really thinking through your why, that is important. Why do you want to do it? Of course, we are here to achieve something, and all of us have different gifts, right? Different things that we want to bring out through our presence. So that is very, very real. And for you, uh, that likely is the food industry getting your the best from you, right? So that's the value creation that you're doing in that. So that is definitely something that you had to bring out at the same time, right? Like I heard a quote which I don't remember who said it, but it's like, let me not die while I'm still alive, right? So right, so let me, so when I still have something to give, let me not die doing something that I'm not supposed to do, right? So if you continue to live a life which is not your true self, which why you don't think you are here for, then that might be a disservice to yourself and a disservice to the world, because then you're not bringing out what you're truly here to do. So that is definitely one thing, but also being very meaningful and very strategic about it, right? So it's not so that your decision doesn't itself come out as frivolous. So for example, um, you had a very good job prior to that. So my understanding is that you would have good financial cushion for you to support the next phase in your life and the next dreams of your life. So definitely that thinking goes around it, because when you start a business, ideally you will not be making money for the next 1 year 2 years, right? It is all investment. It is all the energy that you're putting, it is all the capital that you're putting in, not seeing any results. A lot of businesses don't even make money say 5 years down the line. So that's also a true reality for a lot of businesses. So having that financial backing is the key. At the same time, support system, because there are going to be challenges. It's not going to be easy. It's right, it is simple but it is not easy. So there's a difference, right? You know the steps, you know it's simple, you just do 1 2 3 4, but it's not easy to do. So that's definitely a challenge. And then people really being there to help you come out of your negative spiral is again the key. So continuing to rewire your brain to look at the positives and to look at solutions of how to do this instead of going into your victimhood and complaining is also key. So having that support system that continues to push you, अल्लाह कोई बात नहीं हो जाएगा, हो गया अभी तक, आपकी भी हो जाएगा, क्या हो गया उसमें, right? So that is very, very important and very, very key. So both the external factors are key in really driving this. So Alak, talk to me about the first few years of setting up Element Truffle. So what were the key challenges that you faced, and what so for example, think about in terms of your finances, think about in terms of your idea, in terms of getting your first customer. How did you get your first customer, paying customer, right? So talk to me about that.
So, in terms of finances, right, I think, and this was also connected to my sense of identity, was all these years, ever since I even went to grad school, I was a research assistant. I had always earned a paycheck, right? So there was this very strong sense of identity of receiving a paycheck, regularly at a regular period of time and living your life knowing that there is incoming income, right? Now, when you quit your job, and this is something that very interestingly happened again, like you said, we planned for it to a certain extent because my husband had just a couple of years ago sold his startup and he was working, with the company that had acquired. And that was a certain period of time that he was going to be doing that. And so it felt like this was the right time for me to quit the job because, one person was still bringing in, the money. And 6 to 8 months down the line on that, his role there also was kind of transitioned out, right? And suddenly we were in this state where there was no constant flow of money coming in, right? And I think this is where you have to kind of disconnect your mental reality versus what is actually real, right? So sitting down, going through your finances, because see, when mentally, when you have a paycheck coming in, you don't really worry too much about, going and looking at your finances or, all of that. But the minute you know that there's no paycheck coming in, I think the first thing we kind of went was just sat down, evaluated all the finances, and kind of set, so we had a budget that we'd invested in the company, and kind of working our way through it, right? So I feel you start, of course, anything with that mindset that you have a buffer and you move forward with it. But at the same time, you have to be open to realizing that things will change. And I'm saying will change, right? It's not can change. Entrepreneurship is such a journey where if you think that it's going to go exactly how you planned, then you probably, not on that journey, because things are constantly changing and you just need to be open to adapt to it and recognize that there will be a solution for it and you're not the first one embarking on this path. So I think that was definitely a key one. And the second thing was, you know, we were not, we were here with a very solid vision, right? We wanted to make an impact. And we did not want to repeat the mistakes or create the same situations that we ran into when we were working on Wall Street, right? So I think for us, it was not growth at any cost. So I think again, I'm coming back to the why is because if you start something because you want to have an overnight success, where you want to replicate somebody else's model on your idea, then you're going to struggle. But if you know exactly what you want to do and what impact you're going to make, you will figure the way out, right? So for us, that was another key thing is our fundamentals were very strong, and we had a very clear vision of where we wanted to get to, and we wanted to get there the right way. So I think when you have those things lined up, you are able to figure out that journey. And that's why, like what you shared about having, that the financial planning kind of planned out a little bit ahead of time. Again, I won't say have it all figured out, because then again, it is never going to be enough, because as you start earning more, your lifestyle also starts changing and your needs also keep growing accordingly, right? But finding that balance where you're, because the minute if there is financial stress, you're going to forget about your passion. The first thing you're going to worry about is, okay, how am I going to get groceries, where I'm going to live? You're going to get busy solving for those problems. And if it gets to that point, you're definitely going to lose the vision on your company, right? So I think finding that right balance and moving through this journey is what is critical.
Um, that makes a lot of sense, Alak, right? In terms of the cash flow, that as we continue to earn a bigger paycheck and that lifestyle creep happens to the best of us, that we say that the cash flow is going to remain within whatever budget that we have accounted for, but then uh, we go for bigger cars, right? Or we go for bigger houses, or we go for bigger brands. So that is something that is definitely a consumeristic mindset that has taken over, I would say, the Western world, and
Yes.
also now India and subcontinents and so on and so forth. So that is definitely very important to realize that the true cash flow needs or the necessity needs are very important to figure out, right? Where you're going to live, what you're going to eat, wherein you probably have, if you have kids, how they're going to go to school, so on and so forth, right? So that is the key aspects of your day-to-day living. But then you'll have to downsize on certain other things for you to be able to sustain your passion for, and I'm almost saying 1 to 2 years, because
Yes.
that's exactly how much you will take time to generate cash flow and even break even in terms of generating enough cash flow to spend on your day-to-day living. So that's definitely a key aspect to which you did very well in terms of having a previous life that really helped you build and get you to this point where you were able to say that now let me take, even 4 years, even if I fail, I can always go back, right?
Exactly,
So
exactly.
there is no failing here almost, right? With the skill
That's
sets.
that's exactly
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to say is like I think every step you take is only a step towards growth. It's
yeah,
about which aspect of your life is growing.
yeah,
Maybe your bank balance is not growing.
yeah,
Maybe your popularity is not growing,
hmm,
but something inside of you is growing,
yeah,
right? And I think the we get so lost in focusing on the outer dimension
yeah,
that we forget that it is the inner dimension that drives the outer dimension,
yeah,
right? And when I talk about the inner dimension, it is your confidence,
hmm,
it is your ability to be at peace,
yeah,
to have that sense of freedom. Um, those are so necessary to determine the quality of your life, the state, your mental health,
right,
everything is so, so, so important. And when you start doing things you love, your mental health is absolutely in a better place than when you're stuck in a place where you're making a lot of money
hmm,
but you don't have that mental peace. You come home not with that energy and joy that you want to bring to your family,
hmm,
and that's why we start questioning, why am I doing this,
yeah,
right? And so I think that's very, very important. Just that as you readjust your life, change the parameters you want to measure
hmm,
and see the growth in that.
yeah.
Don't focus on what's not growing, but focus on what's growing.
I agree. That's so important. And then again, just touching back on the bank balance bit of it, right? The finance bit of it. Like, there's never going to be enough. Like, what is enough, right? There's never going to be enough. There is always going to be you'll want to do more. Um, in terms of your job, if you're spending 8 to 10 hours there, then you have ideally maybe 4 hours for your family. Even that, you're mentally at your job. Now the jobs are not like that. You don't bring them home. They There is no work life balance. There is work and life, and they are all mixed together. So it's a hodgepodge of everything, right? So that's how the working world, at least in the white collar job market, has become, where you do not have the leverage to just switch off. So as soon as you leave office, for my father it was like that okay, as soon as he leaves office, now he's done. He doesn't have to do anything. But for us, it's not. We are never switched off on the weekends, on the weekdays. So how do you create a life that is not centered around your job, right? And how do you find time and the same energy? Because you go to your job 8 a.m. in the morning. That's when you are the best of you, generally, for the most of us. By the time 6 hours, 6 o'clock, you're spent. So how would you bring your best to your family? How would you bring your best to everything else that you're doing in terms of your hobby? So that's also very important to realize that money and job are good things to have. They are an important aspect for you to build a life, but the life should not revolve around these two things only. So there are other things that are equally important, if not more important, in your life. Definitely. So interesting, and thank you so much for sharing, Alak. So, Alak, before we move to the final segment, right? I just want to understand, what if you could go back to the 21-year-old Alak, right? And tell her just three things. So what are the three things that you would tell her?
I would tell her that be confident. You're incredible. Follow your heart.
Hmm.
You have a strong um, gut feeling, but you keep pushing it away.
Yeah,
And I think be your authentic self. So don't be afraid about who you are, and be okay, kind of just putting yourself out there.
yeah. I think that's so important. At least the last one, right? That putting yourself out there. And this is exactly what you brought up in the first initial segment. What I felt that after I turned 30, like something after sometime after that, I started to see that external validation mattered less and less. And internal validation, what makes me happy, if it's going to make me happy, I'm going to do it, started to matter more. And it came with a lot of sense of securement, in terms of security, in terms um, of course, getting the right family balance, getting the right emotional balance, getting the right um, your sense of worth, right, is very important as well. Not just, and that happens, at least what I've seen in India, that we are raised to please, that right, please other
Yes.
people, that your bua should like you, your fufaji should like you, right, your relatives should like you, they should say
Yeah.
you sharma ji ka ladka, right, this the best kid, external validation is taught at such a young age, at least in the South Asian households, that it is very hard to come out of
To
it,
break out of
to
it.
break out
Yes.
of it. And it is
Yeah.
very hard to divorce yourself and your sense of identity from only your achievements, right?
Yes.
It's so hard to say that I'm still worthy even if I don't work a high paying corporate job. it's it's so difficult to break out of it, and but once you do, it's so liberating at the same time, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You hit it
Yeah,
spot on. Yeah.
I think that is very important. Alak, would you like to talk about your Element Truffles and your vision and your mission, and then how long you've been running it?
Sure. So we've been running Elements for the last 8 years. I run the company with my husband. And our chocolates, I think we're really on a mission to make Ayurveda more and more accessible and combining this amazing science with um, day to day, what you consume day to day, right? So whether it's a bar of chocolate, or now we have a line of drinking chocolate or protein powders, energy bars, because for me, Ayurveda really changed my life, right? It was a science that I grew up with, but never valued it, right? And it was almost the way, if somebody asked me what Ayurveda was, it's like, oh, all these supplements, right? Bottled, that they don't taste good, and I don't know how they work. But over a period of time, what I've realized is it's such a powerful science. It actually frees you from the do's and don'ts of all the diets and meets you where you're at in your life, right? And it's based on this very simple, fundamental concept of bringing balance in life and listening to your body. I think these are two key kind of, takeaways for me from Ayurveda. And I feel like anybody and everybody can benefit from this beautiful science, and so we wanted to kind of bring it in a very fun way where we kind of made a guilty indulgence into a joyful indulgence. Often feel guilty eating chocolate, but here our chocolate is made with clean ingredients. Our cacao is ethically sourced from Ecuador. We sweetened it with raw honey. There's no other additives added to your chocolate. They're infused with Ayurveda herbs like turmeric, ashwagandha, cardamom, and things like that. And yeah, that's our goal, is to basically bring Ayurveda to this world, one chocolate bar at a time.
Thank you so much for sharing, Alak. It's so interesting. So I heard somewhere, again, I don't remember the source exactly, but it's eat food as your medicine, otherwise you will eat medicine as your food, right? So I think this is really where you hit it on the head, right? That really identifying the balance in your body, in the balanced diet, and bringing in whatever is missing in terms of your own body is the key, and it's going to look different for every individual. And I'm so glad that you have something to the world to offer, which is of so much value and so much, and creates so much impact to the world. So thank you so much for sharing that. For our audience, we'll have a link to Element Truffle somewhere in the description box, so you can definitely check it out. It's going to be delicious. I'm certain there are a range of products available. So choose your pick, and definitely thank you so much for sharing, Alak. It was great having you on the podcast. I had a wonderful conversation. I had a wonderful time with you, really learning about your experiences. And from what I felt, Alak, that you've lived so many lives in one. It's almost inspirational and aspirational to think about that. it is really possible that you can achieve so much in just one life. And we really think that years pass so quickly if you're just doing it, doing it, doing it, doing it. You see 30 years have passed, but you have ensured that you continue to bring joy to your life. So that is definitely very aspirational.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for really creating that space where I could openly share, my journey with you. So it's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alak. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and have a good day now.